I love the park I work for. I love the people I work with. They're the best people I've ever met. But I'm hopeful, that one day I'll get to come back.
You're watching The Big Deal. Federal agencies are still grappling with the Trump administration's waves of abrupt layoffs that have sparked outrage across the nation. That includes the National Park Service, where 1,000 employees were let go last month ahead of the busy spring break and summer seasons. The Park Service operates with about 20,000 employees, which includes 7,000 or so seasonal workers. Those affected by layoffs include park rangers, custodians, and wildlife researchers. Concern is growing that the cuts could harm the 433 sites of the National Park Service, which see more than 325 million visitors every year. Now, over the weekend, thousands of people came out to protest in support of the Park Service at hundreds of demonstrations from California to Maine. Spectrum News reporter Zarina Kharzada spoke with one worker who lost her job in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area.
Dozens took to the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area Visitor Center, voicing their outrage against recent federal cuts to the National Park Service that cost Katie Preston, a probationary archaeological technician here, her job.
I learned about it in an email at like 2 o'clock on a Friday. Basically just said, we've decided to terminate your position. And I was off-boarded by the end of the day.
The Saturday Protect the Parks protest was one of 433 planned across the nation after about 1,000 National Park Service workers lost their jobs. Katie says about 10% of staff here, like biologists, archaeologists, and a ranger, also lost their jobs.
A lot of them are seasonal or term positions, so people come and go pretty quickly. But all of us had terms, and we were supposed to be there for at least 4 years.
The Park Service said they will be hiring nearly 8,000 seasonal workers despite the cuts. The federal cuts came from an initiative from President Donald Trump's administration, hoping to cut down the nation's $36 trillion debt.
We're cutting down the size of government. We have to. We're bloated. We're sloppy. We have a lot of people that aren't doing their job.
The organizer of the area's protest, Chris Graves, says public lands need to be protected.
It's a first step into opening them up to robbing them from the public, and to opening them up to drilling for oil, to taking it over for corporations, maybe selling off parcels to developers. And I won't stand for that.
In the meantime, Katie hopes she'll find a way back here one day.
It was heartbreaking, yeah. I love the park I work for. I love the people I work with. They're the best people I've ever met. But I'm hopeful, that one day I'll get to come back.
We vote! We vote!
A community hoping to preserve nature and the jobs that protect it across the nation. Zarina Kharzada, Spectrum News.
Joining me now with more on the impact of these layoffs on our national parks is Beth Pratt, the California director of the National Wildlife Federation. Beth, thanks so much for joining us. And now, these layoffs, which are part of the administration's efforts to shrink the federal workforce, at what point will visitors start to notice the impact of layoffs on national parks like Yosemite?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Errol. I have to say, just watching people like Katie, who I work in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area some of the time on projects. I've worked in Yosemite National Park and live outside the park for a decade. To see the heartbreak of people like that, and to hear President Trump say that these are sloppy workers who aren't productive, that is absolutely not the truth. These are dedicated public servants, often making very little money, working long hours to serve the public good and to make sure these parks are protected and that people can enjoy them. And you're already seeing the parks being impacted. You're seeing, like in Yosemite, the campground reservation system was on pause. There's not a lot of fat on the bone in parks. They were already underfunded, already grappling with how to ensure that visitor services are provided and that the parks remain protected for future generations, which should be the bottom line here.
Yeah, and of course, people are our primary concern, but how could a lack of staffing affect the wildlife, the welfare of the wildlife in those national parks?
Exactly. My field, I work in wildlife conservation, and I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned because we have some precedent here for what happens when we don't have enough boots on the ground, like during the pandemic. And these parks got trashed. And I think what people need to understand is there's no do-overs here, right? If you do not have enough people managing the wildlife, protecting the landscape, if there are not enough rangers on the ground doing that, if a bear dies, he doesn't get a do-over. If a sensitive meadow is driven upon and damaged, that can take decades to restore. So this really has implications for the long-term protection of these places that I'm mystified. If there's one thing that the American public agrees on, it is that national parks and our public lands are America's best idea. And we all enjoy them, whether it be camping, fishing, hiking, wildlife watching. So that this administration is putting them at risk is really both puzzling and disturbing to me.
A lot of the layoffs at the National Park Service have hit probationary workers, but also some people who have been there for years and were recently promoted. They were also fired. In response to the backlash, the Trump administration said it will consider hiring an additional 3,000 seasonal workers to help fill the gap. Will that get the job done?
I don't think so. And first of all, I have to say again, this was also, these park rangers are dedicated public servants, and being told they were fired for cause when they weren't. Probationary does not mean you're doing something bad. It just means you could be a 20-year employee that moved into a new position. But here's what folks don't understand is the seasonal hiring should have taken place 2 months ago, right? If you work in parks, Memorial Day to Labor Day is extremely busy. You need to have that infrastructure in place. And although it seems like it's, rescinding that offer and saying we can now hire some seasonal, these parks are scrambling now. If you're someone who was told you weren't hired, you're going to go find another job. These people need to, pay their mortgages, pay their bills. So it really put the Park Service to me in disarray at a time when it was the worst timing. And for what? That's not good business, right? These parks generate money for local economies. And if you're putting the Park Service in struggling to hire to maintain the services at such a critical time, I don't even see how that's good business.
Okay. Thank you so much, and best of luck to you and the others who are trying to turn this around, Beth Pratt. Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.